Okay, hello everyone. My name is Eric Masowski, and in this tutorial we're going to be taking a look at global illumination, more specifically global illumination using radiosity. Now in the real world, light bounces. It bounces a lot. Basically, a light ray comes from the light, bounces off a surface, soaks up some of that color information that the surface has, and then continues on until it runs out of energy. And so if we take a look at this diagram here, we have our initial white light ray. It hits a green surface, then it comes off a little bit green and with a slightly lower strength or slightly lower intensity. And then it keeps on doing this over and over until it's completely out of energy. And this is how, if we had, like, say, a room with a desk and a single light hanging above it, this is how we can actually get light underneath the desk, is because those light rays just bounce all over the place and finally work their way underneath the desk. And so if we take a look at this image on the right, you can see that this purple wall is casting some purple color onto that white box, and this side is casting a little bit of yellow. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look at how we can quickly set this up in 3D Studio Max using their built-in Radiosity renderer. Now, one thing to keep in mind with Radiosity is that it's a physical process. So the scale of your environment is extremely important. So make sure that the objects that you create are to scale for whatever intensities you choose for your light. It's a lot easier if you just keep everything accurate, and then you can use lookup tables and various information on the web to figure out how strong your light should be. Okay, so if you open up the scene that came with this tutorial, namely GI_room, you'll see that we have one photometric light. It's just a simple target point using isotropic distribution with D65 white. And then we have a very simple scene here. We have a little L shape, and then we have a self-illuminated red box right here in the middle. Now if we just do a quick render, you'll see what happens. Okay, we have our very bright light up here at the top, and then we have very subtle outline of our L shape, and then as expected, our self-illuminated red box shows up completely. But we can't see the rest of the room. We can barely see, the L shape as it is, and our lighting seems to be mostly focused right in this area, with just a very little bit of a spill down onto the floor. So, what we're going to do is we're just going to first turn on radiosity rendering, and then we're going to start tweaking it and optimizing it to make it look better and better. So, if we go up to rendering, advanced lighting, then radiosity. Now when you first do so, it'll bring up this dialog box. You are assigning the Radiosity plugin. It is recommended that you use the camera exposure control with it. Would you like to change this now? Now the camera exposure control will help avoid oversaturating or blowing out your scene by balancing the colors, balancing the lighting, and kind of altering the output a little bit. And when using radiosity rendering, it usually helps. So we're going to turn that on, click yes. Now on the left hand side here, this is our little dialog. And you'll notice that it's just part of our regular scene, render scene dialog. If we click on common, we have all of our regular rendering options. If we choose advanced lighting, we get to our radiosity settings. So if we just go and click on start, it calculates our scene. So if we render this out, you can see it's much better. We're seeing more of the room. We're getting a very subtle amount of red spilling off into the other objects, and so on. Now one thing that happens with this method of radiosity is that it only stores radiosity information at the vertices. So you can see how we can get these banding issues. So one method that we have is to actually subdivide the mesh at render time, or at radiosity calculation time, to give us more resolution. And so if we click on Radiosity Meshing Parameters and enable it. Now just to show the difference, we're going to disable Use Adaptive Subdivision. Now underneath Maximum Mesh Size, this is basically the size of our triangles. So this is the largest size, or in this case, this is the size that's going to subdivide our mesh to. So if I turn our edges back on, we can currently see how coarse or how minimal our geometry is. And so I'm going to set this to 2 feet. We're now going to go up to the top, click Reset All. It opens up this dialog box. Are you sure you wish to reset the radiosity solution and its geometry? We are. Now, we're going to be resetting quite a bit, so I'm going to turn off Do Not Ask Me This again. And click Yes. And we click Start again. So it goes through, it calculates, and you can see how it divided our mesh. And it also gave us a little bit of a more accurate radiosity solution. Now at this point, what we can do is say we want to try to keep this as simple as possible usually. But if we look down here, we can see some hard changes between shadow and the lit areas. So underneath the interactive tools section, we can do indirect light filtering and direct light filtering. So as we increase this, you can see it kind of softens the lighting effect. It basically averages the surrounding vertices. So this will give us a slightly softer result. If I put this back and render it out, you'll see some black artifacts there, a little bit around there, and some noisiness at the outskirts of the radiosity solution. But if we put it back, you can see it smooths that out nicely. Okay, so now let's take a look at adaptive subdivision. Now adaptive subdivision will take a look at the lighting that is actually being calculated and subdivide the mesh based off of that. So what we have here is we have our maximum size again, which will be this large, and we have our minimum size. So how small do we want to allow the subdivision algorithm to create? So what we're going to set here is we're just going to set it down to 2 inches. We're going to keep the contrast threshold. And the contrast threshold is basically the tolerance. So if the values differ by this percentage, then it's going to end up subdividing further. And then the initial mesh size. So when it first subdivides it, it'll divide it at this size, which is basically a foot. It will then go through and either simplify or divide it further based on this contrast threshold. So we're going to leave it as is for now. I'm going to click Reset All. I'm going to click on Start again. It takes a little bit longer. But if we take a look, you'll notice that the subdivision is focused heavily around the light, as well as down around the base of the L shape here, as well as a little bit in the corner on that side. And so if we render this out, we get a nice, consistent lighting solution. And we can even alter this even further by dropping this down to, say, an inch, and saying that the start is about 6 inches. set, start. There we go, it just gets it a little bit finer even still. Now, when you're lighting your own scenes using Radiosity, we left the default in this case for the initial quality, but you can often get away with a very low value. And since, like for very complicated scenes, you're going to end up, it's going to take a long, long time to calculate a solution, it's best to start small. So, like around 20, you can reset all, start. Notice how quick that went. And yet the Radiosity solution doesn't look that different. And so we're happy with that. We're actually going to drop this down just a little bit further, just to give us a little bit more in the way of shadows. And you notice it's just a little bit better, a little bit more focused for the shadows down here at the bottom. Now, one of the great benefits of using this Radiosity solution as opposed to, say, Mental Ray's Radiosity solution or a third-party renderer is that this is stored in the vertex colors. So we can freely move the environment around to see how it looks from all angles. We notice a little bit of a problem right there. And we can just take a very nice detailed look at it, which would be very, very difficult with the other type of renderers, because what you'd have to do is you'd have to render the scene from all the different vantage points that you want to see it at. And that can be very, very time consuming. Okay, so that will basically do it for this tutorial. I encourage you to go through and for the light, play with the intensity value to see what kind of effect it has on your scene and on the lighting solution. Now, whenever you change a light, a material property, or move an object, what will happen is it will invalidate your solution. And so see, as I move that object, on the left-hand side here in my advanced lighting dialog, it says solution is invalid at current time frame. This lets us know that what is currently stored in the vertex colors, or in the vertices, is not accurate, and we have to recalculate or resolve our solution. So that involves just resetting all, and then clicking start. And then we can try smoothing this out to try to get rid of some of those artifacts a little bit. And give it a quick render. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to email me or post on the forums. Thanks.